Document. Part 4. The journey to the Empire's facility was long and tense. The team traveled under the cover of darkness, moving through dense forests and abandoned roads to avoid detection. They carried minimal gears, just enough weapons, tools, and supplies to get them in and out alive. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. This wasn't just another mission. It was their chance to strike a blow against the Empire. To show that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night, Alex led the group, his eyes scanning the terrain ahead. He had memorized the map Sophie had prepared, committing every detail to memory. Behind him, Jake and Ryan kept watch, their movements fluid and silent. Mia walked alongside Sophie, her hand resting on the strap of her medical kit. Emma and Daniel brought up the rear, their heads bent over a small device that monitored for any signs of Imperial activity. As they neared the facility, the air grew colder, carrying with it the faint hum of machinery. The Empire's outpost was nestled deep within a valley, surrounded by jagged cliffs that made escape nearly impossible. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter, casting harsh shadows across the rocky landscape. Guard towers loomed above, manned by soldiers whose weapons glinted ominously in the light. "This is it," Alex whispered, crouching behind a cluster of rocks. "We need to move carefully." Sophie adjusted her glasses, studying the layout of the compound. "There's a blind spot near the east wall," she said. "If we time it right, we can slip past the guards." Ryan grinned, his confidence unwavering. "Leave the sneaking to me." He crept forward, his movements so smooth and deliberate that he seemed almost invisible. Within moments, he reached the base of the wall and signaled for the others to follow. One by one, they darted across the open ground, hearts pounding as they pressed themselves against the cold metal barrier. Getting inside was only half the battle. The real challenge lay in navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the facility without being caught. According to Sophie's intel, the biological weapons were stored in a secure lab located deep within the complex. Reaching it would require bypassing multiple checkpoints and disabling surveillance systems along the way. Emma and Daniel took point. Once they were inside, their expertise with technology proving invaluable. In fact, they worked quickly, rerouting cameras and hacking into security terminals to clear their path. Meanwhile, Alex and Jake kept watch, ready to neutralize any threats that emerged. Mia stayed close, her fingers brushing against the straps of her medical kit as if drawing strength from its presence. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The walls were lined with pipes and wires humming softly with energy. The air smelled sterile, tinged with something metallic that made Mia's skin crawl. Every sound echoed loudly, forcing them to move with even greater caution. Finally, they reached the lab. Its heavy doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing rows of glass containers filled with glowing green liquid. Inside, each container floated strange, pulsating organisms that seemed to pulse with life. It was both fascinating and horrifying, a glimpse into the Empire's twisted experiments. "We need to destroy this," Sophie said, her voice tight with urgency. "If these things get released, it could mean the end of everything." Emma nodded, already pulling tools from her bag. "Give us a minute. We'll rig the system to overload." While Emma and Daniel worked, the rest of the team prepared for the inevitable confrontation. They knew the Empire wouldn't let them leave without a fight. Sure enough, alarms blared moments later, red lights flashing as the facility descended into chaos. "Time's up," Alex shouted, gripping a makeshift weapon tightly. "Let's move." Out. They burst out of the lab, meeting a squad of Imperial soldiers head-on. The clash was brutal and chaotic, each side fighting with desperation. Jake tackled one soldier, using his size and strength to overpower him. Ryan darted between enemies, striking with precision before disappearing into the fray. Alex fought with calculated ferocity, channeling years of martial arts training into every punch and kick. Mia stayed close, tending to injuries whenever she could. She patched up a gash on Ryan's arm with trembling hands, her mind racing as shouts and gunfire echoed around them. Despite the danger, she refused to falter. These were her teammates, her friends. She would do whatever it took to keep them safe. Just as the tide began to turn in their favor, the facility shook violently. Emma and Daniel's sabotage had triggered a chain reaction, causing explosions to ripple through the building. Flames licked at the walls, sending debris raining down from above. "We need to go, now," Sophie yelled, her voice barely audible. Over the roar of destruction, the team sprinted toward the exit, dodging falling rubble and bursts of fire. Their lungs burned, their legs ached. But they didn't stop not until they burst through the doors and into the cool night air. Behind them, the facility collapsed in on itself, consumed by flames and smoke. For a moment, they stood there, catching their breath and taking in the devastation. Then, slowly, smiles spread across their faces. Against all odds, they had succeeded. But their victory was short-lived. As they regrouped in the forest, Colonel Harper contacted them via a secure channel. His voice was grave, cutting through the adrenaline-fueled high of their escape. "You've done well," he said. "But the Empire knows you're out there now. They won't underestimate you again." Alex exchanged a glance with Mia, then with the rest of the team. They had struck a blow, yes, but the war was far from over. The Empire's arrogance had been shaken, but it wouldn't be broken easily. Still, as they made their way back to the compound, a newfound sense of hope settled over them. They weren't soldiers or superhumans, they were ordinary people who had risen to meet extraordinary challenges. And though the road ahead was uncertain, they knew one thing for sure: they would face it together. In the days that followed, news of their success spread quietly among resistance cells. Whispers of civilians turning the tide against the Empire inspired others to join the fight. People who had once felt powerless realized they had strength in numbers, in unity, and in the unyielding spirit of humanity. For Alex and his team, the mission marked a turning point. They had proven not only to themselves, but to the world, that Earth's deadliest fighters wore civilian faces. But they also knew the hardest battles were yet to come. Document. Part 1. The Empire's ships descended slowly, their massive forms blotting out the sun as they hovered above Earth's atmosphere. They were sleek and metallic, glinting ominously in the light, like predators circling their prey. For years, humanity had heard whispers of an alien empire that traveled through the stars, conquering weaker worlds and stripping them of resources. But no one believed it would ever happen to Earth. Humanity had always thought itself safe, hidden away on a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. Now those beliefs lay shattered. In Chicago, Alex Carter sat on his worn-out couch, staring at the television screen. His apartment was small, cluttered with tools and spare parts from his job as a mechanic. The news channels were all broadcasting the same thing: images of the alien ships filling the skies, accompanied by panicked voices. In grainy footage, beside him, Mia Dawson leaned forward, her fingers gripping the edge of the couch tightly. Her usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by wide eyes and a furrowed brow. "They're really here," she whispered. Immediately, he reached for the remote and turned up the volume. A stern-looking man in a military uniform appeared on the screen, flanked by politicians who looked equally uneasy. Behind them, a holographic image of one of the ships loomed large, dwarfing everything else in the frame. The man began speaking, his tone serious but measured. "Citizens of Earth," he said, "we are facing an unprecedented situation. An alien force has entered our solar system and is demanding our unconditional surrender. We urge everyone to remain calm and follow emergency protocols." Before he could say more, the broadcast cut abruptly to static. Then another image appeared, a tall, imposing figure with pale gray skin and piercing red eyes. His voice filled the room, deep and commanding, carrying an air of superiority that made Alex's skin crawl. "I am Commander Zirak of the Krelos Empire," the alien announced. "Your world is now under our jurisdiction. Resistance will result in your annihilation. Surrender peacefully, and you may yet survive." The message ended as suddenly as it began, leaving only silence in its wake. Alex exhaled slowly, running a hand through his short brown hair. He glanced at Mia, who still hadn't moved. Her dark eyes were fixed on the blank screen, lost in thought. "What do we do?" she asked finally. her voice barely above a whisper. Alex shrugged, though there was no humor in the gesture. What can we do? We're just people, not soldiers or anything. Mia shook her head, her expression hardening. That doesn't mean we don't have a role to play. If they think we'll just roll over and give up, they're wrong. Her words surprised him. Mia wasn't the type to make bold declarations. She worked as a nurse at a local hospital, spending her days caring for patients and keeping her head down. But now, something in her had shifted. Maybe it was the gravity of the situation, or maybe it was the anger simmering beneath the surface. Whatever it was, Alex found himself nodding in agreement. You're right, he said. We can't just sit here and wait for them to decide our fate. Over the next few hours, the city grew quieter. People stayed indoors, glued to their screens, waiting for updates. Outside, the streets were eerily empty, save for the occasional patrol car speeding past. Alex paced back and forth in his apartment, unable to shake the feeling of unease. Stopped near the window, pulling back the curtains slightly to peer outside. The sky was darker than usual, ships casting long shadows over the buildings. Mia sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she read article after article about the Empire's conquests. From what she could gather, the Krylos weren't interested in negotiation. They took what they wanted, leaving destruction in their wake. Entire planets had fallen to them, their populations either enslaved or wiped out entirely. This isn't good, she muttered, setting the phone down. If they've done this to other worlds, what chance do we have? Alex turned away from the window and joined her at the table. We fight, he said simply. We might not have fancy weapons or spaceships, but we've got something they don't expect. And what's that? Mia asked, raising an eyebrow. U.S. Alex replied. People. Regular people who aren't going to let them take everything without a fight. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Mia studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, she said. But how do we even start? As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Both of them froze, exchanging wary glances. No one visited Alex's apartment unannounced, especially not during a crisis like this. Slowly, Alex stood and approached the door, grabbing a wrench from the counter as he passed. He peered through the peephole and saw a woman standing in the hallway. She wore a plain black jacket and carried a briefcase, her face partially obscured by the brim of her hat. Who is it? Alex called out, his grip tightening on the wrench. Agent Laura Bennett, the woman replied. I'm here to speak with Alex Carter and Mia Dawson. Alex hesitated, glancing back at Mia, who gave him a cautious nod. Taking a deep breath, he unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see her clearly. She flashed a badge, confirming her identity before stepping inside. I don't have much time, she said, closing the door behind her. So I'll get straight to the point. You two have been selected for a special operation, Operation Phantom Strike. Selected, Mia repeated, frowning. By who? The government, Laura explained. We've identified individuals across the country with unique skills that could be useful against the Empire. Civilians like you who might not look like fighters, but possess qualities we need. Alex crossed his arms, skeptical. And why us specifically? Laura opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder, handing it to him. Inside were profiles detailing both Alex and Mia's backgrounds. Alex's included notes on his mechanical expertise and combat training in mixed martial arts. Mia's highlighted her medical knowledge and strategic thinking abilities. We've been monitoring potential candidates for months, Laura continued. When the Empire arrived, we knew we'd need unconventional methods to stand a chance. That's where you come in. Mia leaned forward, studying the documents. What exactly does this operation involve? You'll undergo intensive training alongside others like you, Laura said. Once you're ready, you'll be deployed to carry out missions designed to disrupt the Empire's plans. It won't be easy, and the risks are high. But if you succeed, you could turn the tide in our favor. Alex and Mia exchanged another glance. The weight of the decision settled heavily on their shoulders. On one hand, they were being asked to risk their lives for a cause larger than themselves. On the other, doing nothing felt equally unbearable. Finally, Alex spoke. "If we agree, when do we start?" Immediately, Laura replied, "Time is a luxury we don't have." Mia stood, her resolve firm. "Then count us in." Laura nodded, a hint of relief crossing her face. "Good, pack lightly, you'll be briefed en route." As she left, Alex and Mia began gathering their belongings, their minds racing with questions and doubts. Neither knew what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: their lives would never be the same again. Document. Part 2. The car ride to the training facility was quiet, save for the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. Alex sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the city gave way to open countryside. Mia sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Neither of them spoke much, each lost in their own thoughts. Agent Laura Bennett drove silently, her focus fixed on the road ahead. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a secluded compound surrounded by dense forest. The building itself was unremarkable, low and gray, with no signs or markings to indicate its purpose. Guards stood at the entrance, their faces obscured by helmets and visors. They checked Laura's credentials before waving the car through. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. People moved quickly down narrow hallways, carrying files and equipment. Some wore military uniforms, while others dressed in plain clothes like Alex and Mia. Everyone seemed to have a sense of urgency, as though time was running out. Laura led them to a large conference room, where several other individuals were already gathered. There were 6 of them in total, including Alex and Mia. Each person looked different, but they all shared a certain intensity of determination that set them apart from ordinary civilians. "This is your team," Laura announced, gesturing to the group. "You'll be working together from now on." She introduced them one by one. First was Jake Monroe, a tall man with broad shoulders and a confident grin. He had been a stuntman before being recruited, known for his agility and fearlessness. Next was Sophie Grant, a petite woman with sharp features and an even sharper mind. She had competed in chess tournaments since she was a child and was now considered a tactical genius. Then there was Ryan Kelly, lean and wiry, whose parkour skills made him nearly impossible to catch. Rounding out the group were 2 siblings, Emma and Daniel Hayes, both engineers who specialized in robotics and electronics. "Each of you brings something unique to the table," Laura continued. "That's why you're here. Together, you'll form the backbone of Operation Phantom Strike." Alex glanced around the room, taking in his new teammates. They didn't look like soldiers, at least, not in the traditional sense. But there was something about them, an air of capability that made him feel hopeful, despite the dire circumstances. Over the next few days, the team underwent rigorous training. It wasn't like anything Alex or Mia had experienced before. It set a standard. Military drills, they focused on unconventional tactics, guerrilla warfare, stealth maneuvers, and improvisation. Their instructors emphasized adaptability, teaching them how to use whatever resources were available to outsmart the enemy. Jake excelled in physical challenges, scaling walls and navigating obstacle courses with ease. Sophie spent hours poring over maps and schematics, devising strategies that accounted for every possible scenario. Ryan demonstrated his speed and precision during simulated raids, slipping past guards undetected and disabling traps with lightning-fast reflexes. Meanwhile, Emma and Daniel worked tirelessly to modify weapons and gadgets, turning everyday items into tools of resistance. Mia found her niche in medical training. Though she already possessed extensive knowledge, she learned advanced techniques for treating injuries in the field. Her calm demeanor under pressure earned her respect among the group, and she quickly became their go-to person for advice and reassurance. As for Alex, he discovered strengths he hadn't realized he had. His years of mixed martial arts training proved invaluable during combat exercises, where he held his own against opponents twice his size. More importantly, he developed leadership qualities, often stepping up to guide the team through difficult situations. Despite their differences, the group bonded quickly. Late-night conversations turned into laughter-filled moments, easing some of the tension that hung over them. They shared stories about their lives before the Empire's arrival, mundane details that suddenly felt precious. Jake talked about his days filming action movies, describing wild stunts that left audiences gasping. Sophie recounted her victories in chess tournaments, her eyes lighting up as she explained complex strategies. Even Emma and Daniel opened up, revealing their childhood fascination with robots and machines. But it wasn't all camaraderie and bonding. The reality of their mission weighed heavily on everyone. During briefings, they learned more about the Empire, their technology, their tactics, and their ruthlessness. Reports came in daily about cities falling under Imperial control, entire populations displaced or worse. Every victory the Empire claimed chipped away at hope, making their task seem increasingly impossible. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, the team gathered in the mess hall. Exhausted and hungry, they picked at their food in silence. Finally, Ryan broke the quiet. "What happens if we fail?" he asked, his voice low but steady. No one answered immediately. It's a question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Eventually, Sophie spoke up. "We can't afford to think like that," she said firmly. "If we start doubting ourselves, then we've already lost." Emma nodded in agreement. "She's right. We have to believe we can make a difference. Otherwise, why are we even here?" Her words struck a chord with everyone. Slowly, heads began to nod, resolve hardening once again. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but giving up wasn't an option, not when so much depended on their success. Later that night, Alex lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The others slept soundly around him, their breathing slow and rhythmic. He thought about everything they'd learned, everything they'd sacrificed to get here. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond the Empire's shadow, a world where humanity could thrive without fear. It was a long shot, he knew. But maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. And if they did, Alex vowed to give it everything he had. The next morning, the team received their first assignment. It was a reconnaissance mission aimed at gathering intelligence on the Empire's movements. They would infiltrate a nearby town under Imperial occupation, observe their activities, and report back. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was crucial. As they prepared to leave, Laura pulled Alex aside. "Remember," she said, her tone serious, "this isn't just about survival. It's about proving to the Empire and to yourselves that Earth won't go down without a fight." Alex nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He returned to the group, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they stepped into the unknown, united by a shared purpose and a burning desire to protect their home. What they didn't know was that this mission would test them in ways they couldn't anticipate. But one thing was certain: the Empire had no idea what it was up against. Document Part 3. The town of Crestwood lay eerily silent under the pale morning light. Once a bustling community, it now stood as a ghost of its former self. The streets were empty, save for the occasional Imperial patrol marching in tight formations. Buildings bore the scars of occupation, broken windows, scorch marks, and posters plastered with alien symbols that no one could decipher. It was a place frozen in fear, where even the wind seemed hesitant to stir. Alex and his team moved cautiously through the outskirts, staying low and out of sight. They wore civilian clothes to blend in, though blending in wasn't easy when every face they passed belonged to someone who had either fled or been taken. Jake led the way, his tall frame moving with practiced ease as he scanned the area for threats. Sophie followed close behind, clutching a small tablet that displayed a map of the town. Ryan brought up the rear, his sharp eyes darting between shadows and alleyways, always alert for movement. Mia stayed near Alex, her medical kit slung over her shoulder. She kept glancing at him, searching for reassurance, but Alex's expression remained focused. He knew this mission was critical, not just for gathering intel, but for proving to themselves that they could handle what lay ahead. Still, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Their first objective was simple: locate an Imperial outpost, rumored to house communication equipment. If they could gather information about the Empire's plans, it might give Earth's resistance a fighting chance, but getting there undetected would be tricky. Patrols roamed the streets at regular intervals, their weapons gleaming ominously in the sunlight. "This way," Sophie whispered, pointing to a narrow alley between two crumbling buildings. "We can cut through here and avoid the main road." Groups slipped into the shadows, their footsteps muffled by debris scattered across the ground. The air smelled faintly of smoke and decay, a grim reminder of the Empire's arrival. As they reached the end of the alley, Jake held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Peering around the corner, he spotted a pair of Imperial soldiers standing guard outside a warehouse. Their armor was sleek and metallic, reflecting the dull light like mirrors. "They're blocking the entrance," Jake murmured. "Any ideas, Sophie?" Tapped her chin thoughtfully. "If we distract them, we might be able to slip inside while they're distracted." Ryan grinned, his energy palpable even in such tense moments. "Leave that to me." Before anyone could protest, he darted off, disappearing into the maze of alleys. A few minutes later, a loud crash echoed through the streets, followed by shouting. The guards turned toward the noise, gripping their weapons tightly as they hurried to investigate. The team seized the opportunity, slipping past the distracted soldiers and into the warehouse. Inside, the space was dimly lit, filled with crates and machinery that hummed softly. Emma and Daniel immediately went to work examining the equipment, their fingers flying over control panels as they searched for anything useful. Meanwhile, Mia opened her medical kit and began rummaging through it, not for supplies, but for a small device Emma and Daniel had built earlier. It looked like a handheld scanner, but was designed to intercept and decode Imperial transmissions. "Got something?" Daniel said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. Pointed to a screen, displaying lines of text written in the Empire's language. "It's encrypted, but I think we can crack it." As Emma worked on decoding the message, Alex kept watch near the door, his heart pounding in his chest. Every second felt like an eternity, the silence broken only by the soft clicks of keys and the distant sound of voices outside. Then, without warning, the door burst open, and 3 Imperial soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised, hands up. One of them barked, his voice cold and mechanical. For a split second, everyone froze. But then Jake sprang into action, tackling the nearest soldier with surprising speed. The others followed suit, relying on instincts honed during training. Alex ducked under a swinging rifle, delivering a swift kick to another soldier's midsection. Mia grabbed a wrench from her kit and swung it hard, striking a third soldier squarely in the helmet. The clang of metal against metal reverberated through the room. The fight was chaotic but brief. Within moments, the soldiers lay unconscious on the floor, their weapons stripped away. Breathing heavily, the team regrouped, adrenaline still coursing. "Through their veins? That was too close," Sophie muttered, adjusting her glasses. "We need to move now." They didn't have time to celebrate their narrow escape. Grabbing what data they could, they hurried out of the warehouse and back, into the labyrinth of alleys. By the time reinforcements arrived, the team was long gone, melting into the shadows like phantoms. Back at the compound, they gathered in the briefing room to review their findings. Emma and Daniel had managed to decode part of the intercepted transmission. It contained coordinates and references to a larger operation, something involving biological weapons. The implication sent a chill down everyone's spine. "They're planning something big," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "And if we don't stop them, it could mean disaster for Earth." Colonel Harper, the grizzled veteran overseeing their training, nodded grimly. "You've done well," he said, "but this is just the beginning. We need more intel, and we need it fast." Over the next few days, the team prepared for their next mission. This time, the stakes were higher. It would venture deeper into enemy territory, targeting a facility believed to be central to the Empire's operations. It was risky, but necessary. If they succeeded, they could deal a significant blow to the invaders. If they failed, well, none of them wanted to think about that. As they packed their gear, Alex found himself reflecting on how far they'd come. Just weeks ago, he and Mia had been ordinary civilians, struggling to make sense of the chaos unfolding around them. Now they were part of something bigger, a ragtag group of unlikely warriors, united by a shared purpose. Each member brought something unique to the table, their skills complementing one another in ways that made them stronger together. Jake's confidence inspired courage, while Sophie's intellect provided clarity. Ryan's agility and quick thinking kept them one step ahead, and Emma and Daniel's technical expertise ensured they had the tools they needed to succeed. And then there was Maya, steady, compassionate, and resourceful. Her presence grounded Alex, reminding him why they fought in the first place. But as much as he admired his teammates, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of his mind. The Empire was powerful, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever faced. Could they really stand a chance against such overwhelming odds, or were they simply delaying the inevitable? His doubts gnawed at him, but he pushed them aside. There was no room for hesitation now. Whatever fears he harbored, he knew one thing for certain: surrender was not an option, not when so many lives depended on their success. That night, as the team gathered for a final briefing, Colonel Harper addressed them with a mixture of pride and solemnity. "Tomorrow, you'll face your greatest challenge yet," he said. "Remember, you're not just fighting for yourselves. You're fighting for everyone who calls this planet home." His words resonated deeply, lighting a fire within each of them. They weren't heroes in the traditional sense, just ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Yet, in that moment, they realized something profound. Heroism wasn't about grand gestures or legendary deeds. It was about standing up when it mattered most, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. With renewed determination, they prepared for what lay ahead. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the compound, the team set out once again. Their destination was unknown, their path fraught with danger. But one thing was clear: they would face whatever came their way, together. And, perhaps, just perhaps, they would prove to the Empire and to themselves that Earth's deadliest fighters wore civilian faces. Document Part 5. The days following their daring raid on the Empire's facility were a blur of activity. The team returned to the compound, battered but triumphant, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had struck a meaningful blow against the invaders. Yet as the adrenaline faded and reality set in, they realized the cost of their actions. Empire was no longer complacent. It now knew Earth harbored fighters who could outwit its forces. Retaliation was inevitable. Colonel Harper called an emergency meeting in the briefing room. The air was thick with tension as he addressed the group, his weathered face etched with concern. "We've analyzed the intel you recovered," he began, his voice low and steady. "What we found confirms our worst fears. The Empire isn't just experimenting with biological weapons, they're planning to use them on a massive scale." Emma and Daniel stood at the front of the room, presenting the data they had extracted from the facility. On a large screen behind them, diagrams and charts flickered to life, detailing the Empire's plans. The biological agents were designed to spread rapidly, targeting entire populations within weeks. Once released, they would devastate cities, leaving survivors weakened and easy to control. "This changes everything," Sophie said, her sharp eyes scanning the information. "If they deploy these weapons, we won't have time to regroup or prepare. We need to act now." Alex leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "How do we stop them?" Harper hesitated before answering. "There's a central hub where the Empire coordinates its operations and outposts located far beyond Imperial-controlled territory. If we can infiltrate it, we might be able to disrupt their plans entirely." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the gravity of his words. The mission would be dangerous, far riskier than anything they had attempted before. But there was no other choice. If they didn't strike first, millions could die. "We'll go undercover," Sophie suggested, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Disguise ourselves as traders or merchants. Blend in until we reach the outpost." Jake nodded, his confident grin returning. "Sounds like my kind of plan. Let's do this." Mia glanced at Alex, worry flickering across her face. She trusted the team, but the thought of venturing so deep into enemy territory filled her with dread. Still, she forced herself to stay calm. They had come this far together, and she wouldn't let fear hold her back. Preparations began immediately. Emma and Daniel worked tirelessly to create disguises and forge documents, ensuring the team looked and acted like ordinary civilians. Ryan practiced mimicking the mannerisms of traders he'd observed during reconnaissance missions, while Jake rehearsed stories to explain their presence near the outpost. Sophie mapped out every possible route, accounting for patrols and checkpoints. Along the way, meanwhile, Alex and Mia focused on honing their combat skills. They sparred in the training room, pushing themselves harder than ever before. Each punch, each block, carried the weight of what lay ahead. When they finally collapsed onto the mats, sweaty and exhausted, Mia spoke softly. "What if we fail?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Alex turned to look at her, his expression unwavering. "We can't afford to think like that. Failure isn't an option, not when so much depends on us." His words echoed in her mind long after their session ended. Though doubt lingered, she clung to the hope that their efforts would make a difference. When the day of departure arrived, the team gathered in the compound's courtyard. Dressed in plain clothes and carrying supplies hidden in crates labeled with alien symbols, they resembled nothing more than weary travelers seeking refuge. Colonel Harper approached them, his gaze sweeping over each member. "You've done the impossible before," he said, his tone firm but encouraging. "Now, go show the Empire why humanity will never surrender." With those final words, they set off, traveling under the cover of darkness. Their journey took them through hostile terrain, past abandoned villages and scorched fields. At times, they encountered Imperial patrols, forcing them to take detours or hide until the danger passed. Tension hung heavy in the air, every rustle of leaves or distant sound sending hearts racing. Finally, after days of travel, they reached the outskirts of the Empire's central hub. The outpost loomed ahead, its towering spires reaching toward the sky. Floodlights illuminated the grounds, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements methodical and precise. "This is it," Alex whispered, crouching behind a rocky outcrop. "Let's stick to the plan." Ryan moved first, slipping through the darkness with effortless grace. He disabled a security camera mounted on a nearby wall, clearing the way for the others to follow. One by one, they crept closer, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath them. Inside the outpost, chaos reigned. Alien officials hurried down corridors, clutching datapads and shouting orders. Workers scurried about, loading crates onto transport ships bound for occupied territories. The team blended seamlessly into the crowd, their disguises holding up under scrutiny. Sophie guided them through the labyrinthine halls, her memory of the blueprints flawless. They avoided high-traffic areas, sticking to service tunnels and maintenance shafts whenever possible. Along the way, Emma and Daniel planted small devices designed to disable key systems once triggered. Their ultimate goal was the command center, a heavily fortified chamber where the Empire coordinated its military operations. Reaching it required navigating multiple layers of security, including biometric scanners and armed guards. But Sophie had anticipated this, devising a clever distraction to draw attention away from their path. "Now," she hissed, signaling Jake to act. He stepped into view, pretending to argue loudly with a worker about missing cargo. His voice carried through the hall, drawing curious glances from nearby soldiers. As the commotion escalated, the rest of the team slipped past unnoticed, slipping into the command center undetected. Inside, rows of monitors displayed real-time updates on troop movements and supply routes. A single officer sat at a console, oblivious to their presence. Alex approached silently, delivering a swift blow to the back of the officer's neck. The man slumped forward, unconscious. Emma and Daniel sprang into action, connecting their equipment to the mainframe. Lines of code scrolled across the screens as they worked furiously to extract vital information. Meanwhile, Mia kept watch, her heart pounding as she listened for any sign of trouble. "We're almost done," Daniel muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Just a few more seconds." Suddenly the door slid open, revealing a squad of Imperial soldiers. Their weapons were trained directly on the team, their expressions cold and unyielding. "Drop your weapons," one of them ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, without hesitation, Ryan lunged forward, tackling the nearest soldier. Chaos erupted as the team fought back, using whatever tools and tactics they had at their disposal. Alex grappled with an opponent twice his size, leveraging his martial arts training to gain the upper hand. Jake used his brute strength to overpower multiple foes, while Sophie darted between them. Disabling firearms with quick precision, Mia stayed close to Emma and Daniel, shielding them as they completed their task. "It's done," Emma shouted. "Pulling a flash drive from the console? Let's go!" They retreated swiftly, retracing their steps through the outpost. Behind them, alarms blared, red lights flashing as the facility descended into disarray. Explosions rocked the building as the devices they had planted earlier detonated, crippling critical infrastructure. Reaching the exit was a race against time. Bullets whizzed past, striking walls and shattering glass. Adrenaline surged through their veins as they sprinted toward freedom. The roar of destruction growing louder with each passing second. Finally, they burst through the doors, collapsing onto the hard ground outside. Smoke billowed into the sky as the outpost crumbled behind them. For a moment, they simply lay there, gasping for breath and staring at the inferno. "We did it," Mia said softly, her voice trembling with relief. Alex nodded, faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, we did." But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew the fight was far from over. The Empire's grip on Earth remained strong, and retaliation would come swiftly. Yet amidst the uncertainty, one truth stood clear. They had proven themselves capable of standing toe-to-toe with an enemy that once seemed invincible as they disappeared into the night. Their resolve burned brighter than ever. The Empire had underestimated them once. It wouldn't happen again. Document. Part 6. The team's escape from the Empire's central hub was nothing short of miraculous. As they fled into the darkness, the outpost burned behind them, its collapse a testament to their daring and ingenuity. But there was no time to rest or celebrate. The Empire would not let such an attack go unanswered, and already, signs of retaliation were beginning to show. Within hours of their return to the compound, reports flooded in from across the globe. Imperial forces had launched coordinated assaults on resistance strongholds, targeting civilians suspected of aiding the fight. Entire neighborhoods were razed, their inhabitants rounded up and taken away. The message was clear. Anyone who stood against the Empire would face swift and brutal punishment. Colonel Harper called another meeting, his expression grim as he addressed the group. "The Empire is angry," he said, his voice low but steady. "They've doubled down on their efforts to crush us. We need to adapt fast." Alex listened intently, his mind racing with possibilities. He glanced at Mia, who sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced by a quiet determination, her eyes reflecting both fear and resolve. Around the table, the rest of the team exchanged worried glances. They had faced danger before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about staying one step ahead of an enemy that seemed determined to destroy everything they cared about. "We can't keep operating the way we have been," Sophie interjected, breaking the silence. "Every move we make is being watched. If we're going to survive, we need to change our strategy." Ryan nodded, leaning forward. "She's right. We've hit them hard, but now they're hitting back harder. What do we do?" Harper sighed. Rubbing his temples, "We focus on what we do best, staying unpredictable. But we also need to root out any weaknesses within our own ranks. There's a chance someone inside the Resistance has been feeding information to the Empire." The room grew tense at his words. Betrayal was something none of them wanted to consider. But the evidence was hard to ignore. Recent attacks had been too precise, too well-coordinated for the Empire to have acted alone. Someone close to the Resistance had betrayed them, and that thought sent a chill through everyone present. "We'll handle it," Alex said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "But first, we need to regroup, figure out where we stand and what resources we still have." Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to assess the damage. They reached out to other cells scattered across the globe, piecing together fragments of intelligence to form a clearer picture of the Empire's movements. What they discovered was alarming. Not only had the Empire intensified its crackdown on human populations, but it had also begun deploying new technology, advanced drones, capable of tracking individuals with pinpoint accuracy. "They're hunting us," Emma muttered, staring at a screen filled with surveillance footage. "It's like they know exactly where we'll be." Daniel frowned, adjusting his glasses. "That's because they might actually know. Whoever leaked our plans gave them everything they needed to track us." The realization weighed heavily on the group. Trust, once a cornerstone of their operation, now felt fragile. Suspicion crept into every interaction, even among teammates who had fought side by side. Whispers of betrayal spread like wildfire, sowing doubt and paranoia. One name kept coming up during discussions: Ethan Cole, a charismatic politician known for his fiery speeches against the Empire. Ethan had risen to prominence as a symbol of hope for many, but recent rumors suggested he had been holding secret meetings with Imperial officials, offering them sensitive information in exchange for protection. "He wouldn't," Mia said firmly when the topic arose. "Ethan's always been on our side." Sophie raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "People say a lot of things when they think it'll save their skin. We can't afford to take chances." Alex agreed, though reluctantly. "We need proof. Until then, we treat him as a suspect, but discreetly." Tracking Ethan proved more difficult than expected. His movements were erratic, often shifting between safe houses and guarded compounds. Jake volunteered to tail him, using his experience as a stuntman to blend into crowds without drawing attention. For days, he shadowed Ethan, gathering snippets of conversation and observing his behavior. Finally, he returned to the compound, his expression grave. "I saw him meet with one of their officers," he said, pulling out a small recording device. He handed over files, classified documents about our operations. The team gathered around as Jake played the recording. Ethan's voice was unmistakable, laced with desperation as he pleaded for assurances that his family would be spared. The implications were devastating. Mia sank into a chair, her face pale. "How could he do this?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "It doesn't matter why," Alex said, his tone firm. "What matters is stopping him before he does more damage." They devised a plan to confront Ethan, knowing it would be risky. If he suspected they were onto him, he might alert the Empire, putting countless lives in danger. Timing was crucial. Under the cover of darkness, they approached the safe house where Ethan was staying, slipping past guards with practiced ease. Inside, Ethan sat at a table, surrounded by papers and data pads. He looked up sharply as the door opened, his eyes widening. In shock, "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "You betrayed us," Alex said, stepping forward. "You sold us out to the Empire." Ethan's face flushed red, anger replacing his initial surprise. "You don't understand. I did what I had to do to protect my family. I promised they'd leave them alone if I cooperated." "Your family?" Jake snapped, his fists clenched. "What about everyone else? All the people who've died because of your choices?" Ethan slumped back in his chair, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Mia stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "It doesn't matter what you meant. What matters is what you did, and now you need to make it right." Reluctantly, Ethan agreed to cooperate, providing critical details about upcoming Imperial attacks. In exchange, the team promised to ensure his family's safety, a promise they intended to keep. Despite their anger, with Ethan's information in hand, they launched counterattacks, striking key targets and disrupting supply lines. Each victory bolstered morale, proving that even in the face of betrayal, humanity could still fight back. But the cost of Ethan's actions lingered. Trust had been broken, and rebuilding it wouldn't be easy. As they prepared for the battles ahead, Alex couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. They had started as ordinary people, united by a shared purpose. Now, they were warriors, scarred but unbroken, determined to see their mission through to the end. The Empire had underestimated them once, wouldn't happen again.